So welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews where we discuss with local business leaders, their backgrounds, their successes and challenges, and what really drives them forwards. And this morning, I'm delighted to have with us Andy Roberts, who's the CMO at Planet Sport. So first, Andy, thank you so much for taking the time with us today. If you'd like to introduce yourself and Planet Sport and how you help people, what you do, that would be wonderful.
Hi there, thanks very much for having me along, Chris. As you said, I'm Andy Roberts, a veteran of the sports media scene, particularly here in Leeds and in the north for many years now. At the moment, I'm CMO of a business called Planet Sport, which is a really exciting business that's focused on technology, media and betting within the sports industry. We really focus on, we cut our teeth effectively as publishers, so we reach about 15 to 20 million unique users a month right across the globe, primarily in English-speaking markets, across a variety of different titles. Football 365, TEAMtalk, Planet F1, Planet Rugby are some of the titles that are particularly popular within our network. And the majority of our business is done through advertising, so that's a very important part of our revenue mix. And an adjunct to that is also a very strong business-to-business services operation as well. So we provide content, data, services, websites, strategy, ad tech services to a range of other media owners, publishers, broadcasters, mobile operators, right around the globe. So we're also, we test our products and our services on our own platforms and then market and sell those to other people as well. And as part of that, the betting and gaming is a sort of strong part of our content mix, our advertising mix, our B2B services mix as well. And we've relatively recently launched our own sportsbook as well, not least to help us sort of increase our learnings in terms of servicing operators in that space, but also sort of taking control, of a line of revenue that really we've been the service provider for previously. So we're pretty multifaceted, based in Leeds. We're about 140 strong if you include freelancers and contractors, growing brilliantly, bounced straight back from the COVID pandemic. And yeah, we've got big ambitions.
Well, it's very exciting. Must be very exciting time. We've hopefully been touched a little bit about that whole development into the digital world. I think you mentioned just before we spoke that you've also founded a new networking group specifically for digital sport.
That's right. Yeah, it was an itch I've wanted to scratch for many years. Really, that always felt that although we've got some fantastic businesses, both here in Leeds and in the wider north, be that sports clubs or huge operators like Will Hill, Sky Betting and Gaming, Sky, to name but a few, plus a really interesting sports data scene, and one of my former employers, DAZN, all have really strong footprints here in the north, and yet we always, in terms of meeting up with people and networking, that always seemed to take place in London and further afield at conferences. So it's been very much my intention is to basically get a lot of those people together and working, towards the common goal really of supporting each other, both in terms of career development, but also contacts, networking and business development. So that's something that we started in April. We call it Digital Sport North, and we're looking forward to putting on some pretty interesting similar type of networking evenings in the very near future.
Brilliant. That sounds really exciting. I'll look forward to hearing more about that. So if we sort of start thinking about a little bit about your background, how you got into business and why this particular one, what you do.
So take you back more than 20 years. So I first cut my teeth in the consulting world working for KPMG, and I remember one one idle lunchtime, not that there's many idle lunchtimes for me, coming across a very interesting new take on sports media, which was a site called football365.com, which I've already mentioned. There's a theme here, and I was just absolutely fascinated by the fact that there was a website that was writing about football in a really sort of offbeat and a bit more entertaining fashion than where you could, in the ways that you could consume sports media anywhere else, be it in the mainstream media or on the BBC. This seemed like completely revolutionary to me, and at that time Football 365 was part of a wider business called 365 Corporation, which was originally one of the darlings of the dot-com boom era. So that got me thinking, and I was then desperate to get into the world of sports media, which I then did, and I got to move back to Leeds, which is where I'd studied at Leeds University with a politics degree, completely unrelated, obviously, but kind of related, I think, in the world of business. Got to move to work in marketing for sportinglife.com. Which was then a real trailblazer multi-sports website that had spun out of being the racing newspaper of record, and it had really pioneered an interesting angle for me, which was combining sports content with betting opportunities. The two things seem really logically hand in hand to me. So.
Sorry about that, Andy. We got to cut off there, but you were just talking about joining sportinglife.com.
Yeah, Sporting Life. So I joined to work in marketing for that business. As I think I said, very successful, racing newspaper of hundreds of years, and they had really pioneered a really interesting angle of combining sports betting with the sports content. So that really seemed a really logical thing for me, and subsequently it's proved very much so to the whole of the sort of the sports betting industry, I think. More of that later, I guess. I really got an opportunity to work in sport for the first time properly. Really fell in love with racing as well, because that was all part of the knowledge I needed to generate to understand how to work in that market, and similarly with betting as well. So at the time we were also running a sports book in tandem with the Tote. So spent many happy years sort of learning my trade in the sports media world as Sporting Life. Although that didn't last particularly long, because the dot-com boom that I mentioned turned rapidly to bust in sort of 2001, 2002, and there was a big shake-up in the industry. But that then proved to be an opportunity for us. So Sporting Life was acquired by a business called UK Betting PLC, which was founded by Peter Dubens, who's gone on to be a very, very successful investor in his own right, and was actually the chap that was responsible for bringing those colour-changing T-shirts to the UK, if you recall those in the late 80s. Amongst many other things. But so he set about basically bringing together a lot of businesses from in and around the sports media world and pulling them together into one business. So we acquired some of the assets of sports.com, some from Sportal, from TEAMtalk, and then the 365 Corporation as well, so which was then trading as 365 Digital Media. So at that point I managed to get my hands on working on Football 365, which was very exciting, which obviously had been sort of the precursor to me getting involved in everything in the first place. So we basically built a business that could say is very similar to the business that we now have with Planet Sport, which became known as 365 Media Group. And we were very successful in building that up. It was a great team of people, some of whom I'm still working with now with Planet Sport, I'm proud to say. And then in late 2006, early 2007, we were acquired by Sky, and I spent a good time sort of merging the betting business into Sky Betting and Gaming, into Sky Bet, and then working for the next sort of 5 years on Sky Sports in the digital media side of that business, and that was super exciting. I loved my time there at Sky. And then in about 2012, I was enticed to go and work with a former boss of mine who was setting up a new division for Perform Group. They wanted to get involved in sports media and publishing themselves. So we had a very interesting time, basically setting up an office and having a real sort of good startup vibe, but within a big organization with a within a PLC. So did that for a few years, and then in 2016 I tried my hand at consulting in and around the sports industry. Enjoyed that enormously, and I started working with this effectively a business that had spun out of 365 Media Group and Sky, that was called Planet Sport Publishing. More on that in a minute, I'll come back to them. Also during that time, got together with former colleague of mine, Graham Shaw, alongside one of your former interviewees, Andy Elliott and Chris Buckley, and helped them create Sport Acuity. And then with my work with Planet Sport Publishing, they were working in tandem with another business that was run by another one of my former colleagues from years gone by at 365 Media Group, called Your Media, and they were responsible for the advertising and the technology services within Planet Sport Publishing. And then I joined Your Media with a view to us effectively merging Your Media and Planet Sport Publishing to become one single business that I obviously described at the outset of this call, that's now Planet Sport, which is a sort of fully encapsulated publishing business with its own tech platform, its own advertising platform, and all those B2B services that we operate. So come sort of full circle, working with lots of experienced people who know what they're doing, who've been there, done it, and yeah, it's a space we know well, and yeah, we're having a lot of fun doing it.
Wow, what a journey! That's
sorry, that's a bit of an eye of the needle job, isn't it? Really, but yeah,
it's amazing. It's quite what a track record, all the way from, as you say, from KPMG through to where you are now. And when you were growing up, is this sort of thing what you always wanted to do, or what goals did you have then?
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that. So I was explaining this to someone just the other day. At the outset of my career, I was very, very keen on working in and around music, and that's sort of what I spent a lot of my sort of spare time doing, particularly when I was at university. I was writing for newspapers and fanzines and things like that. So I had a sort of a career crossroads, after doing a bit of work experiences around the music industry. It's like sport or music are my go-to things. So I wanted to follow both those passions, and certainly in my 20s and early 30s, I was able to actually do both. So whilst we were working on Sporting Life and 365, in my evenings, I was pretty busy doing gig reviews, putting on gigs, and setting up a record label as well. But that's a whole other story, which I won't trouble you with. But yeah, music was the other passion.
Wow.
So, but yeah, sports won out in terms of career, and yeah, it's a great, fascinating world that's always evolving.
Brilliant. And through all those sort of journeys, the journey you've had so far, what would you say are the biggest issues you've had to overcome?
Biggest issues, certainly in businesses that I've been in, is always trying to do a lot of things and trying to do all those things very well. So Time's a finite and precious resource, and there's, well, certainly in the digital world that we inhabit, and in the sports media and betting world that we inhabit, there are a number of different avenues that you can go down. For example, having a whole range of different websites is can be difficult to manage. So it's where do you focus your attention and your objectives and KPIs at any one time, when you're covering a lot of different sports, and then you're monetizing those eyeballs in a number of different ways. So that's probably the big challenge, and myself, like all chaps, struggle to focus on more than one thing at a time.
Yes, common challenge, definitely get that one. And what would you say are some of the biggest learnings you've had in business?
Certainly one learning that springs to mind, there's a recent thing, and something that we've really focused on shaping the Planet Sport business on recently, is certainly learning from the pandemic and having that level of diversification, as long as you can manage that, and focus on the right things at the right time. So revenue diversification has been a really important thing for us, not least because, as soon as lockdown 1 happened, pretty much everyone turned off the advertising taps, and we were left scratching our heads thinking, crikey, is this it? So that's certainly something I would say, and it just comes down to having the right people in the right place to focus on the right things.
Funnily enough, I'd forgotten how much sport was affected through lockdown. Yes. There's a group of five of us, sort of. We all have we put together a £5 bet, to £5 each, and we pick a particular sport or a particular match, and we bet as an accumulator every Friday for a Saturday game. And I remember, as football dropped, and then rugby dropped, and then everything dropped, and we ended up, I think we ended up betting on second division Azerbaijani football.
That's
I think
right.
was the
Turkmenistan and Belarusian football were the only things really going at that point. Yes.
Absolutely. The strange thing is, we're as bad, we're as successful as that as we were picking them in the UK. So we might as well just start on anything. I think we are a coaching organisation, a business coaching organisation. I'm keen to know who are the best coaches you've ever worked with, whether that's in business or sport or life in general.
Difficult to say, really. Well, actually, it isn't. During my time at Sky, I was very fortunate to work on the Team Sky Pro Cycling Team project. So it was absolutely fascinating to get a little bit of an insight into the way that Sir Dave Brailsford runs an operation, and but also Dr. Steve Peters' work. A lot of people are very much into the chimp paradox. I'd be very much the same. I think that's a really important piece of work that I've seen. I've seen the amazing work that he has done, not least with that team. Ronnie O'Sullivan, for example, as well. Absolutely fascinating in terms of the power of the mind over adversity or challenges that sports stars have overcome.
I think two amazing people. Funnily enough, we had Steve Peters speaking at our conference that happened. We have a national conference, happened to be in Harrogate that year, and he was speaking and he said he was talking about Ronnie O'Sullivan and how some of not the detail of helping him, but helping him. And the funniest thing was, he said, I spoke to Ronnie last night, telling him I was speaking here, and Ronnie said, well, do you want me to come over? I'm happy to tell people how great you are. And he said, no, you focus on what you're doing. It was in the middle of the World Championships, and it's just amazing. He said, no, I'll just pop over. If I'm not playing, incredible. So and clearly had a big effect for I used to follow snooker a lot, but I follow it a bit now, and just you can see the calmness with which he's lost that real emotional side of what he's doing, and you know the results have continued to follow in that way. So, and are there any particular favourite quotes or sayings that you fall back on, either in good times or challenging times?
I think quite early in my youth, and I think this is possibly my father's influence. He used to proffer Dale Carnegie at me quite a lot. So a lot of those sort of spring to mind. But they all sound a bit cheesy, really. But when fate hands you a lemon, make lemonade. You know, that kind of cheesy stuff. To be interesting, be interested, and I think that's really kind of important, and something, you know, especially, you know, when you go to, you know, functions and events and networking dues, actually, is, you know, to have those really interesting conversations, is to make sure that you're interested in the other person. So those kinds of things, I think, in the sort of darker moments, there's one that he's recycled from Tennyson, which is I must lose myself in action lest I wither in despair, because I think that's really important in terms of keeping yourself occupied. You know, if there are things that are troubling you, I think that's always been useful. And then outside of that, my solicitor sort of kept saying this to me the other day, which is more of a Yorkshire phrase. Both of us are not from Yorkshire, but it's like, so you don't get out for nout, I think. Absolutely. Is a very important thing. It's something we've learnt living in Yorkshire. So.
Absolutely, no, it's a great phrase, isn't it? I'm similar. I'm not from here, but I've been here more than half my life. I do quite a bit more than half my life now, so I consider myself. And I remember speaking a few years ago, and I said I realised I've sort of almost become Yorkshire when I chose my last car based on value for money, because you should never choose a car based on value for money. That's not what they're about, in my opinion. But that's great. You don't get out for now. One of my clients, we were talking about something. I can't remember what it was, but he had something similar. But he said that's hard work for nails. And I thought a lot of the work I do with people is they're working really hard for no return, and it's a great Yorkshire phrase. So
it's sort of sorry, just to interrupt. Yeah, I mean that's sort of come up again in terms of you know, where we look long and hard at bits of our business and thinking, should we be doing that? Is that actually going to earn us any revenue, or is it a nice to have? You know, it's and that's where that comes in as well. So
I think, you know, you talk about KPIs, there are things like return on investment and return on time. I think, you know, especially for busy business people, looking at return on time, that, you know, our own time is crucial, because we often don't value it like we would money. We'd look at an ROI for how much I'm spending, but when we look at our time, is this something? I think you mentioned earlier about holding one thing. You know, many of us suffer with, you know, shiny object syndrome, and you know, making sure we don't lead ourselves down too long a path, too big, deeper rabbit warren.
That's right.
So what would you say you've learned about yourself through your career?
I've had the benefit of, you know, all those sorts of courses and things like that you get, you know, in organisations like KPMG and Sky and Perform. So I'm, you know, pretty clear on being I was looking at this. I was an ENTP, maybe possibly an ENTJ on my Myers-Briggs. So you know, knowing oneself is always really important. But I think understanding other perspectives and, you know, and talking the same language as other people, particularly in areas of conflict and things like that, I think are really important. Certainly in some of those courses as well, we've done some pretty detailed 360 feedback sessions, and, you know, had peers assess me and things like that, and you know, pretty clear on the sort of individual I suppose I am, really. But also have to keep reminding myself, you know, sometimes things don't always go right, and life isn't fair. You know, that's just life, and you just got to roll with the punches a bit as well. So
yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, things go wrong, goalposts move, all of that kind of stuff. You just got to live with it. But at the same time, you've got to be true to your values. And I think for me, that's all about integrity, loyalty, can-do attitude, candor with people, and just like I said before, being interested in other people and what they're up to as well.
100%. And the piece about being interesting, being interested to be interesting, I think is really true. I think the other one I love from Stephen Covey, which is listen to understand rather than respond. And I think that's really important. Is I want to understand what you're saying rather than just say what I'm going to say next or whatever. And it's easy to do sometimes. And so looking forward, I mean, it may a really fascinating history and where you've come from. But looking forward, what does the future look like, and what are the main challenges you foresee, if any?
We've just got to grow it. We've got to find, make it a bigger boat. Really, there's a whole world out there, particularly, in the betting industry. It's no secret the US is opening up rapidly, but there are other markets as well. Similarly, right around the world. So we're sort of trying to shape our business to as efficiently reach as many people as we can, and that means having the best products, best content, and finding the right people to help us build that business. So yeah, loads of scope. Sport doesn't go away; it just gets bigger, really. So you just got to have more of a slice of it, really. Absolutely,
couldn't agree more. It's there's always developments out there, and it's just great. Just being, I love sport in all its facets. But both looking at professional, amateur, participating and as well as watching, and it's it just brings so many people together. It's you could pretty much guarantee if you've got an opinion on a particular sport, you'll find somebody that's got either both the same opinion and a contrary opinion. I think often, which is part of, I guess, what makes conversation so lively often. So just sort of again looking forward a little bit, but I'm interested to get just your thoughts on what would you say to anybody that was thinking of going to business right now, Andy?
Into business more generally at the moment.
Yeah, just if they were thinking of starting or forming their own business, what advice would you give them?
I think there's, I mean, it can be a more exciting time. This sounds a bit strange given the current economic climate, but in terms of actually being able to set up a business and, obviously been fortunate to do that a few times. The technology now means that anything is really possible, whether that's your accounting software, setting up a website, taking payments, looking after customers, seeking new customers and marketing channels. Everything is kind of possible just through your computer. So there are sort of limited barriers to entry, really, in terms of that. It's about having the right idea and actually finding yourself framing a problem and solving that problem for somebody is ultimately what business is all about. If you got an idea that solves a problem for somebody, then there's going to be people out there wanting to buy it.
100%. It is as simple as that. I guess it's, I like the phrase, it's simple but not necessarily easy, but it is as simple as that. Now I was lucky enough to listen to, and then I had a quick chat with Sir Terry Matthews, who's known as the first Welsh billionaire. He owns Celtic Manor, Golf Cut Inn, and various other things. You may be aware of him. And somebody asked him during his speech, what's your secret to business? And he said, I know this sounds a bit trite, but I asked my customers what they wanted, and I got it for them. And just there was just this light bulb of, that's not a bad definition of any sort of business, is it? What do you want? I'll go and find it, or create it, or solve the problem. and it doesn't have to be as difficult as I guess we often make it in general.
There's always nuances and everything and complications, but yeah, it fundamentally comes down to that: is somebody interested in what you're selling? Because does it help them in some way?
Yeah, 100%. And if you started your business again, is there anything that you would do differently?
Well, it's not strictly my business, so but I think it's a difficult one, really, because it takes a while to, if we're talking about the publishing side, it takes a while to launch a site. But I think really you've got to be thinking about what are the really current channels for the audience that you're trying to reach. It's a silly phrase, but horses for courses, really. So I think it's about selecting the right channel to communicate to those people in. So I say that because younger demographics aren't consuming sports content in the same way as people like you or I are. The trick is finding the right way to monetize that. For example, TikTok or Instagram might be the go-to for a younger demographic, but the trick an entrepreneur has got to come up with is how actually they can generate revenue from those platforms, rather than those platforms hoover up all of the potential revenue from those individuals that are using them. So I'm not really answering the question particularly well. It's
interesting. I mean, that's a really fascinating point, and it is, classic marketing, isn't it? Is where where do we find our target market in the right concept?
I think it's being laser focused on that target market and where they, what they're doing, where they inhabit, and then creating a proposition that absolutely fairly and squarely says, we're solving a problem for you, or here's something that you haven't seen before.
Absolutely. And it's as you said, it's continually adjusting to what those new things are, I guess, because as you say, what people what would work for people like you and I won't work for the next generations, and it's accepting that, even when you think, well, that's, even it feels a bit crazy, it's like, well, that's a bit, not to be the whole idea of influencers and various things. It doesn't matter that it sort of feels a bit strange, but it works, so that's cool.
Well, I think I've probably given you a marketeer's answer there, thinking about routes to market rather than
No, brilliant. I think it's bang on, but I think really important, and I think it's an absolutely vital part of any business, isn't it? So it's I think the key message there, whether it's marketing or business in general, is the continual innovation and change to meet the market that exists. We see a friend of mine, there's been a phrase around for a long time, which is, if we always do what we always did, we always get what we always want, always got, and that's fine. But a friend of mine sort of upgraded that a few years ago, and he said, if we always do what we always did, we're history. Because and we've seen, unfortunately, going back, well, Debenhams probably quite recently, Woolworths, MFI, all these businesses didn't change with their market and go by the wayside. So that consistent innovation, both in marketing, but in product lines and etc., it is absolutely vital, I think.
Change is super important, that's for sure.
Absolutely. It's change happens. I love I was told a story about Tony Benn, Lord Benn, when, after he'd retired from Parliament, he used to speak. They invited him to speak a lot at universities and educational establishments, and apparently he would always start his speech by saying, we all wake up in the morning knowing less than we did the day before, and of course, all the lectures, all the universities, but you can't say that, we're education, we're trying to and apparently what he meant was, the amount of information in the world is increasing exponentially. So our proportion of it, actually, however hard we learn, is bound to, is bound to reduce. So it's that constant learning and thirst for knowledge is absolutely vital, even just to keep up. And I think it's something that I've, it's stuck with me with regard to whatever I think right now may or may not be right, but it probably won't be right in a year's time or 2 years' time. And I guess in the digital world, that's, even more rapid the change, I would think.
Yeah, you can't stand still, otherwise you'll be history eventually. So
absolutely. So finally, just one final question. I'm interested to know what would be the best advice you could give to an 18-year-old you if you could go back in time and do so.
Probably don't be in so much of a hurry, I suppose. Soak up as much experience as possible rather than sort of dive in and you need to get a career, which sounds counterintuitive, and I'm not sure it's the same advice I'd give to my daughters at the point where they might be graduating from university. But actually, I think, I think particularly in business as well, you have to be in business and doing something for the other opportunities to exist. So, it might not be necessarily, doing something that's dramatically highly paid or whatever, but if it's the right experience and it exposes you to the right people and the right opportunities, then I think a lot more is possible, I suppose, rather than, jumping on, joining the milk round, or, trying to get a job as quickly as possible. I think there's a bit more nuance to it than that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think there are more and more opportunities nowadays to do, to build careers in different ways as well, I think, and great, great for that reason. But no, I'd agree. I think it's look at our options, because most people I speak to, the career they're in right now is not the career they started, and and therefore it would suggest that whether or not you ever could, with enough thinking, pick the right one from day dot or not, I don't know, but it does suggest that it's quite a difficult age to be planning the rest of your life, I guess.
I think so, unless you really are fixated, or you've got some amazing talent in tennis or golf or football, then I don't think there's many people that can sort of hand on heart say I'm definitely going to forge a career in something, and it'll be for life.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Well, Andy, thank you so much. It's been really fascinating, and it's great to just following through that career that you've had, and clearly a lot of change in the marketplace you're in over time. So thank you so much for your time. And obviously, and if people want to know a little bit more about you guys, where was the best place to find out?
Group.planetsport.com gives you the full story, and also gives you the full rundown of the history of how we got to where we got to. So that's where you can find us. Of course, if you're into football, we've got Football 365, TEAMtalk.com, PlanetFootball.com, Formula One nuts, PlanetF1.com. If you're into rugby, it's LoveRugbyLeague.com if you're into league, or Planet Rugby if you're into rugby union. I'll leave it there. There's a bunch of others, but
brilliant. And do you have anything set up for digital sport?
Digital Sport North. Please come and find me on LinkedIn. We do have a group, and we're in the throes of putting together a website for that. Please look me up, and I'll tell you all about it. Brilliant.
Well, again, thanks so much, Andy. Maybe it might be good to circle back in a year or so and just see how things are going with all those ventures. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.